What the fuck is up, world? Diali, Tlaltic back. We back in this bitch. Another podcast for that ass. Another Grito. Sea dicho. Coming about. Well, it's time, big dog. You know what the vibes are? Since the last episode. A lot has happened since the last episode. As I'm sure you probably are aware of, right? So much so that I felt the impetus to say, you know what? Let's jump back on this bitch and give another shout out at the world in regards to everything that's unfolding currently, geopolitically. But before we get into that, let's give an actual shout out to the world that's listening. I see you, dog. Trust me. I see you, okay? And I appreciate the fuck out of you. Inching ever so closer to the 10,000 download mark, which means so much to me. So much to me, dog. I can't even... I literally cannot put into words how much that means to me. To have only released 3 episodes last year, one of them with subpar audio and video, at like 6-month intervals, basically, and to still get almost basically 1,000 downloads, it's not a humble brag. It's just a shout out to you for doing so. Like, fuck yeah, dog. Like, I appreciate the fuck out of you. Is what I'm trying to say. So, shout out to you for listening to this. Shout out for you for sharing this, because obviously this mostly spreads by word of mouth. So I appreciate the fuck out of anybody who's like, yo, you gotta check this dumbass out. I don't agree with what he says, but some of what he says is like, all right, a little thought stimulating, right? So yeah, just shout out to you. There's no individual shout outs per se for today, because the collective love that I have felt in returning back this 3 episodes now in about 3 weeks time has been overwhelming. The support for sure, right? And I just wanted to give a shout out to anybody who has reached out and be like, yo, when's the next podcast type shit, you know what I mean? And also to the silent, quote unquote, invisible listeners who, although you don't reach out, your presence is absolutely seen and appreciated by way of, you know, like the statistics and all that kind of shit. So, yeah, dog, let's, I'm actually, before I get into it, let me clarify, if you haven't already, follow your boy, OG_IceNice13 on the gram, OG.IceNice13 on X. I'm starting to use X a lot more, which is actually one of the reasons why, it's not one of the reasons why, let me clarify. It's just, X is clearly where it's at in terms of social media content, news, politically. I'll never get on TikTok. It's just not my thing, right? It's like a generational thing. I understand it. And I know there's people my age who are on it, and I'm not throwing any shade at them at all whatsoever. I'm just saying it's not really my thing. You know what I mean? Perhaps at my, expense, clearly at my expense, because that's obviously a very popular social media platform, but it is what it is, player. People used to spread word of mouth back in the ancient times of the pre-internet through zines and, word of mouth, and I'm perfectly content with it. That's what it takes, right? All that to say is I don't really fuck with TikTok, and I'm not going to. But I have started fucking with X more, so if you're on X, you can find me there, OG.IceNice13. And the reason why I was going to say that it's not an impetus. The actual impetus is the zeitgeist, bro, to use the philosophical language, if you will, right? The world is worlding right now, dog. What is that famous quote? I know I've mentioned it before, and I'm going to butcher it because I didn't have it offhand. We have, decades where, it's a Lenin quote where he states something like, we have decades where life goes by slowly and we have years when decades happen type shit. You know what I mean? And right now we're definitely, even though it's the start of the Gregorian New Year, it's definitely one of those decades unfolding type shit, right? Which is actually where I wanted to start this episode, because one of the things that I really forgot to mention, and it's not that I forgot, like as I was doing my last episode, I kept navigating my, thoughts in a way and trying to see when was the best place to insert this particular, concept, I guess, into the episode. And that is, my discussion on geopolitical events in relationship to my lectures in class and the overall driving force. I mean, I already talked about the driving force in the previous episode, so I won't delve into that, but I'm saying, I guess one of the things that I left out is a better way to put it, as in terms of a driving force, was the lack of awareness that students had of the effects that the geopolitical climate is going to have on them, right? And one of the things that I didn't mention, and again, I just couldn't really find like the right way to insert it into the conversation. So I kind of left it out. But today there's just no way around it. And that is the draft. You know what I'm saying? And the reason being is because, so for the last about year and a half now. So let me further qualify this, right? I'm not just going to throw that shit all on you. You gotta lick it before you stick it type shit, dog. You know what I'm saying? Freaky ass podcast full. But I'm about to start the new semester in like a week or so. The spring semester, spring 26 semester. And I will be starting the spring 26 semester the same exact way as I have been starting every other semester for the past 2 years now, basically. And that is by just asking students, yo, are you ready to get drafted for World War III? Again, and this is the part that I really couldn't figure out how to insert into the previous episode, right? But it really is like that is how I've been starting all my classes, whether it's ethics or introduction to philosophy. I've started out by asking them, are you fools ready to get drafted for World War III? Because that shit's on the horizon, dog. They've been pushing for World War III for a long time now. And it seems like ever more of a reality as we continue to inch forward. And, obviously, this takes a lot of students aback because, well, first of all, who starts a fucking lecture like that? You know what I'm saying? Let alone a semester. But second of all, because I again, as I mentioned before, a lot of them don't really keep up with the political climate. And because of that, the idea of them being drafted is so foreign and removed from their everyday reality that they're like, what the fuck is this dude talking about, bro? I thought the draft was some shit that got done away with after the Vietnam War. It did. But now they're working to reintroduce it. And they're going to. And when they do, my students, unfortunately, many of them, because of the age, straight up, they're going to be the ones that are going to be getting the call. You know what I'm saying? And I emphasize to them, like, in the past, this wasn't something that was, or rather, this wasn't something that you had to concern yourself with if you weren't a male. You know what I'm saying? If you were a male, like, this was a very real possibility that you're going to get drafted. But in the past, if you were a female, if you were gay, if you were, whatever, it wasn't really going to affect you. But because of the way things have shaken out over the past, it's been like 60 years now since Vietnam, basically, give or take, they don't give a fuck anymore, dog. They're drafting everybody getting drafted up in this bitch, right? Males first and foremost, of course, the younger males. All the way up through the age of 39. I'm 39, but they're going to take you long before they take me, dog. And you got me all the way fucking twisted if you think I'm going to go fight for this international banking cartel. Juarez, Mexico is fucking 2 minutes away from the hood, dog. I'll be straight. You know what I'm saying? But even then, at 39, like they ain't coming for me. They're coming for my 18-year-old students first. And everyone in between 18 to 39 males, able-bodied males, right? And then after that, males, and this is the part that I was saying, like, gay, trans, don't matter, dog. They're coming for you. You know what I'm saying? And then after that, of course, they're coming for the women. They don't give a fuck that you're a woman anymore. They'll put your ass on the front line because, equal rights, equal fights, equality, and all that type of shit. You know what I'm saying? So they're coming for my female students too. And that's the part that always trips out a lot of the women students that I have. It's like, what do you mean I can get drafted to go fight in the war? Yeah, man. They changed the laws. This is a new world we're living in, big dog. They're coming for everybody. They need all the bodies to die for Israel. Right? And that's basically what's happening. That's what it is. All the things that are unfolding right now are because, there was a point in time when saying this was considered a quote unquote conspiracy, but bro, how much more evidence do you need to accept that the United States is an occupied country? This country, right? I don't say we because it's funny how the United States is always collectivist when they need us to die for them, right? But when we need healthcare, food, water, shelter, safety, it's always fuck you, figure it out yourself type shit. You know what I mean? But I live in this motherfucker. So, my life is directly impacted by the geopolitical events and the governmental effects that it has here in America, right? My tax dollars are going to fund Israeli war crimes, essentially. And because the politicians here in America, because they can't, they're all degenerates, essentially, and traitors to the United States of America, they've been bought and sold by Israeli lobbies. And because of that, now they're being ushered in to a three-front war at their behest, right? you can debate the merits of, how involved Israel might be with Venezuela, but there's no question that they are heavily involved in what's happening with Iran right now, right? It's funny, dog, how Trump is on television talking about how if the Iranian government harms any of the protesters, the United States, respond with the full force of the United States military. But just 2 days ago, from when this podcast is being recorded, a protester here, and again, I haven't even really seen the video, dog. I'm at the point now where I don't really like to watch people die anymore. You know what I mean? So I haven't seen the full video, but I'm speaking, of course, of Rene Good getting blasted by the ICE agent. You know what I'm saying? And just the whole idea here being is where is the United States to protect its own citizens when they're protesting against the authoritarian government type shit? But we'll talk about that when the time comes. Again, you gotta lick it before you stick it, big dog. We'll slowly work our way up to that, right? For now, the basic idea is they've been vying for war with Iran for a very, very, very long time now. Not us Americans. So, us regulars, most of us, we do have our completely indoctrinated, inculcated fucking bootlicking cucks who will mindlessly support anything the politicians spoon feed them, regardless of how compromised these politicians clearly are, regardless of how morally bankrupt these politicians clearly are. We still, unfortunately, have a massive swell of Americans who will support them and die on the whole hill of "this is America, bro, love it or leave it" type shit. You know what I mean? So because of that, and I say that because, like I said, I have a lot of listeners who aren't from America. Shout out to you motherfuckers, right? From around the world. So if you're listening to this and being like, who does this motherfucker relate himself with? The answer is you, dog. You, right? I am pro people. I am team people. People, us individuals, the workers, we aren't represented by, let alone representative of our governments, right? Our governments don't represent us. They represent, big money investors. And they definitely don't represent our values. Like, I'm telling you, I don't want war with Iran, and I'm not alone with this. I don't want war with Venezuela, and I'm not alone with this. I don't want war crimes to continue being carried out in Palestine. It's being done with my tax dollars, in my name, because I don't have a fucking choice to pay them. They take them out of my paycheck, first and foremost, before I even see the money. Second of all, if by chance I try to, not pay those taxes, they show up at my doorstep with a bunch of fucking jackbooted thugs, guns drawn, ready to take me to jail or put a bullet in my fucking brown ass because I didn't pay, my filial piety to the masters of mankind or whatever. You know what I'm saying? So all that to say is that, yeah, like this is for the longest time was considered a quote unquote conspiracy, but it's like, bro, how much, at what point can you just like openly state, yeah, the United States is an occupied nation that is being, essentially has been the will of the people has been completely hijacked by the big money investors who are pushing for wars all across the world that are going to lead to World War III, that are going to lead to a direct impact, that's going to have a direct impact. Again, this was, at one point in time considered conspiracy theory to say that this is like if you look it up, let's look it up. Let me just clarify. I don't want to be, like I said, I have my little handy dandy iPad here. So let's pull it up. Zionist occupied government, aka the ZOG, right? This was considered a conspiracy theory. And if you Google it right now, it'll tell you the same thing. The term Zionist, I'm just reading verbatim off of Google here. The term Zionist occupied government is an anti-Semitic conspiracy theory that falsely claims Jews secretly control the governments of Western countries, particularly the United States. This concept is a core belief within white supremacist and far-right extremist ideologies. Coinage. The term ZOG was coined in a 1976 article by American neo-Nazi activist Eric Thompson and was spread by U.S. white supremacists in the 70s and 80s. Core claim. Adherents believe that the secret cabal of Jews or Zionist occupation government manipulates national governments, controls against international banks, and conspires against the interests of white, Christians, or sometimes Islamic populations. Propagated by extremists, the phrase has been used by various extremist groups, including the neo-Nazi group the Order and Aryan Nations. It is also found on the far left and Islamist platforms that seek to delegitimize Israel by using Zionist as a pejorative shorthand for quote-unquote Jew. Connection to older tropes. The Zog theory is a modern iteration of long-standing anti-Semitic conspiracy myths, such as those forged in the protocols of the learned elders of Zion, which falsely depict Jews as orchestrating world domination, right? So that's all according to the ADL, the Anti-Defamation League, where they tell us that, saying that the United States and its government, by way of its politicians, have been overtaken by big money, essentially like AIPAC, for instance, is a conspiracy. But at what point can we actually point to this and say, well, which part of it is a conspiracy, dog? Because again, if for those, and this is the part about not keeping up, like, what X comes into play. This is all over X right now currently. You know what I'm saying? It takes a while. I had been focused primarily on Instagram, and it will pop up like in, small pockets on Instagram. But it generally takes a while for news like this, underground, I guess, if you want to say it, to reach like the bigger platforms on Instagram. But on X, it's like trending. It was trending as soon as it happened. And what I'm talking about here is this is an article from military.com. So again, I'm not like pulling up some random, fucking conspiratorial drivel here. This is like this is an official government website, basically, right? Military.com. Israel's F-35 veto. How Tel Aviv's opposition could block a U.S. sale to Turkey. I mean, again, so in shorthand, what basically happened is Turkey, rather, was seeking to rejoin the F-35 program, right? The F-35 program being it's the military industrial complex and their sale of the F-35 fighter jets, right? And Turkey was trying to get a hold of some, right? And by way of the United States government. And Israel vetoed it. So again, you have this shit online is telling you to say that by saying things like a Zionist occupied government is an anti-Semitic conspiracy theory, while simultaneously you have a foreign country, Israel, who is vetoing legislation on behalf of the United States of America. You know what I mean? So it's like, well, who are these politicians serving? Are they serving the American interests? Are they serving the interests of us American citizens? Or are they serving the interests of another country, namely Israel and the Zionists, right? And the answer is, well, when you have things like this, it doesn't look very good for the people who are trying to state that pointing that out is an anti-Semitic conspiracy, right? Now, in the interest of full disclosure, basically what happens is the United States has an agreement with Israel so the United States could technically still sell these F-35s, these 5th generation F-35 fighter jets to Turkey. But what's going to happen is it's not going to come with the technology, Israeli developed technology that helps put it at the forefront of technological innovation, right? So Turkey could still technically get these. The United States could technically still sell them, but it would come at a significant disadvantage, I guess, in terms of comparable F-35s in the region, because they wouldn't come with the full technology that makes them what they are capable of, right? Which, of course, is death machines from above. And again, the whole point of even introducing this in the first place is not to perpetuate anti-Semitic baseless conspiracy theories. Because as I mentioned before, although at one point I was immersed deeply as a young person into conspiracy theories, I've grown up. I'm a fucking adult. And all I'm realistically doing is examining this world situation that we're all living in critically, and just applying the philosophical tools that I've gained along the experience of my life to understand, just try to make sense of how everything that's unfolding, why it's unfolding, and how it's going to affect not just me, but everyone else around me and around the world, dog. Because, if World War III pops up, bro, ain't nobody safe. Ain't nobody safe, right? Me, you, my students, your loved ones, my loved ones, it doesn't matter what side we're on. Poor people always die. Rich people always fucking benefit off of war. We don't want war. You know what I mean? So the idea that, we're being pushed towards nuclear brinksmanship, essentially. I'm not trying to be hyperbolic, but in a nuclear armed world, that's a ever-present danger with world war. And that we're being pushed in that direction because our politicians are clearly compromised at that point and not reflecting the values of Americans. It's okay, well, at what point can we start asking this question? Is it possible that the United States is in fact a Zionist occupied nation? Again, to ground it in some of the philosophy, bro, neither the law nor tradition is immune from moral criticism. It's a fundamental ethical starting point. And that implies people, bro. No one is immune from criticism. No one is fucking above having their motives questioned, right? If your motives are pure, if your intentions are pure, they should be able to withstand the critiques and reasonings. You should be able to provide justification for why, other than fuck you, that's why. Another reason why, aside from, being beholden, essentially a tax slave on fucking prison planet, being forced to pay for shit that I don't agree with, as I mentioned before in previous episodes. You want me to pay for Americans' healthcare? You want me to pay to fix the roads? You want me to fund free public education? You want me to fund free college and, food, water, shelter, safety to my fellow Americans? Absolutely. No problem at all whatsoever. Take my taxes and do exactly that. Don't fucking take my taxes and give them to foreign governments to kill people though, dog. And definitely don't do so to help, facilitate the creation of it's a transnational control state apparatus between the United States and Israel that is going to be used to further fucking make miserable the lives of Americans for sure. But now, more directly, this is hood philosophy, dog. Hood philosophy at its core is concerned with, it's a philosophy that emerged, as I mentioned before, in response to the colonial terror that we've experienced here on Turtle Island, specifically along what is now United States-Mexico border. So because of that, by default, hood philosophy is intrinsically concerned with quote unquote immigrants. You know what I mean? And immigrant rights. I say quote unquote because obviously immigrant would be a colonial creation in and of itself. Europeans don't get to come to our ancestral land and tell us who is and who isn't legal. They don't get to come to our ancestral land and tell us who deserves to live here and who doesn't. Right? But regardless, because of the effect that this colonial terror has and continues, the enduring legacy of colonial terror has had on the immigrant quote unquote communities, obviously hood philosophy is concerned with this, dog. So in response to the transnational state apparatus, the control of, these oligarchs, bro, these masters of mankind who are creating these technologies like Palantir that was implemented and perfected in Palestine and is now being imported to the United States of America by way of ICE, Immigrations and Customs Enforcement, not your boy, ICE motherfucking nice. I'm telling you, dog, these ICE agents give such a terrible, shitty name to the name ICE. But whatever the case is, like I mentioned, you have these Palantir technologies that were deployed ruthlessly against Palestinians in the last, for sure 2 years, but realistically, it's been perfected over a 40-year process, 60-year process. God damn, dog. Right? 1967 to today, basically 49 years, right? 59 years rather. But, the point being is that this is the boomerang effect. This is the point that I'm trying to get to. It's philosophical, dog, right? This is not conspiratorial drivel. It's all philosophical, right? I'm not just coming on this bitch and ranting fucking mindlessly on some fucking whack-ass Alex Jones type shit. Alex Jones is a deep state actor, dog. His family is fucking tied to CIA and NSA. Like, that's not me, dog. I'm a quote unquote first generation American. My fucking mom didn't get her citizenship until I was in middle school, which means that I lived under the, potential threat of having my mother deported at any potential moment up until, teenage years. You know what I'm saying? The same for my grandparents who didn't get their citizenship until, roughly the same time. But the whole point being is that I'm not connected to this fucking deep state intelligence. You know what I'm saying? I'm an organic intellectual, to use the terms of Gromsky. I'm not a fucking conspiracy theorist. I'm telling you the lived experience of what it's like growing up in the wake of this enduring legacy of terror. You know what I mean? And although there might be parallels between what I'm saying and what dumbass Alex Jones says, that doesn't mean that we're on the same fucking vibe. We're not. You know what I mean? What I'm trying to tell you is that these fucking technologies that have been deployed and implemented in the Middle East by, the Israeli occupying force, dog, it's the boomerang effect, like I mentioned, right? It gets perfected. It's a form of colonial policing that gets perfected and implemented and perfected rather in the colonies, right? First and foremost, before returning back to its homeland and being implemented on the citizens of that colonial nation, right? So again, it often gets misattributed to Foucault, but it's more of like a general political philosophy term that has been used to demonstrate the ways colonialism has, resulted in an ever increasing form of politicization across nations all around the world in the last 500 years, right? And we're seeing that right now with ICE. This has always been my central concern. It's always been, like, again, hood philosophy. And again, I don't want to say central concern because I'm not trying to, like, foment any sort of the conception of any sort of division. Like, I don't give a fuck if you're Mexican, American, Chicano, indigenous, you have your own nations, like, let's say Cherokee. I don't give a fuck if you're in Europe, whether you're in Ukraine, Russia, Germany. I don't care if you're in South Africa, Australia, Chile, Ecuador, Brazil. I don't care. Like, you're me and I am you. You know what I'm saying? So I'm not trying to, like, foment some sort of, like, I only care about this immigrant community. No. I care about peoples all around the planet, dog. But I'm telling you that it's that I've experienced it by way of the effect that it's had on the immigrant community here in El Paso, because this is where I'm at. You know what I mean? And that because of that, that's where my initial awareness and concern comes with it. But the point being with the boomerang effect is it comes for everybody, dog. It hits everybody. We're all going to be beholden to this shit. You know what I'm saying? And that's why I'm saying, like, I don't give a fuck what part of the world you're on. You're going to be affected by this shit too. And that's the shit that, like, these bootlickers right now. So let's go back to the Rene Good assassination. She was murdered, dog. She was iced by an ICE officer, right? Again, quote unquote, peaceful protesters in Iran have, and I don't say quote unquote because I'm dismissing what's happening in Iran. It's not that I don't know, it's not that I don't care. It's just I'm not prepared to talk about it today. I have my ideas, right? But in the interest of remaining as impartial as possible, I'm going to allow shit to unfold before I, share them. But the point that I'm saying is that these motherfuckers, have more protection, or at least an illusion of protection from the United States government than people here in the United States, who are essentially, we are living under what it is exactly that the, architects of this nation first warned about, and that is the standing army in the form of ICE. And, how it relates to this Rene Good is that we have had, you had these dumbasses who were walking around saying shit like, got what I voted for. Give it about 5 more years, big dog. Give it about 5 more years for the boomerang effect to fully take hold. And then we'll really see if you got what you voted for. Because right now, yeah, dog, they're coming after the immigrant community. Ain't no doubt about it. They've been coming after the immigrant community because, like I said, these European Americans have the misguided idea that they get to come to this land and tell us, the original inhabitants of this land, who is original, who is not original, who is legal, who is illegal, who's an immigrant, who's a citizen, etc. Right? We're people of this earth, dog. Global citizens. The national borders, they don't mean nothing to me. I've already told you. Loyal to the soil, big dog. Right? The boundaries, those are arbitrary, man-made, and they fluctuate with time. Okay? I am team people first and foremost. But because bootlickers don't agree, right? They abide by these colonial borders and they say, oh, we're Americans on this side, and if you're not an American, then fuck you. Pinche cara de nopales, way. People, like, that's a Mexican slang. People that, like, it's basically, for those of you who are, like, hip to that language, because it's, like, super, like, Mexican-American Chicano culture. Cara de nopales, and it's Spanish for the face of a cactus, like cactus face, basically. It's a terrible translation, but that's roughly what it boils down to. And what they're talking about is people that look just like you and me, like Mexicans, right? Quote unquote Mexicans. I'm not Mexican, I'm a Chicano, dog, right? Ni de aquí, ni de allá. Neither from America nor Mexico. Yeah, Americans don't accept me, dog. Mexicans don't either. That's a whole different conversation for a different timeline, right? But, to use the colonial language, I am a person of Mexican descent, right? So you have these cara de nopales, people who look just like me and you, right, if you're Mexican, that turn around and, they get their citizenship, and then they're like, they turn around and give a giant fuck you to the people, who are trying to do the same coming after them. People who would have been their mom, their dad, their grandma, their grandpa just 50 years ago, 30 years ago, or in my case, fucking 20 years ago. Oh, I'm sorry. How old am I? 39 years, right? 20, I wish, dog. Right? No, not really. I appreciate being in my 30s. But yeah, like 40 years ago, roughly, that would have been their parents, their grandparents, coming here for them to be here today to turn around and do a giant fuck you to immigrants, or the quote unquote immigrants, right? Who are trying to come after us to get the same benefits that we have here living in America today. You know what I mean? So when I say cara de nopales, it's like an insult, dog. It's like, man, you're a vendido, dog. You're a traitor. You've betrayed your own people. And it's generally meant to allude to, a person of Mexican ethnicity betraying another person of Mexican ethnicity. But like I mentioned, dog, I don't give a fuck about these colonial borders. You're my people regardless of where you are on the planet. We're all team people. I don't give a fuck if you're Argentinian, Chilean, Puerto Rican, Cuban, a Russian, a German, a French person, right? That's my English as a second language kicking in. I don't give a fuck. Like we're all people, right? Team people, the class consciousness type shit. You know what I'm saying? So, anyways, in relationship to the ICE thing, they've perfected it. They've perfected it in Palestine, and they're bringing it here to the United States of America. And they brought it here. It's been here for the last year for sure in full effect, but long before this, which is basically a standing army, which is hilarious because you have these right wing. They're grifters, dog. They're grifters essentially at this point. Like if you're still supporting this MAGA movement, dog, not only are you when I see somebody still supporting Trump, like the MAGA movement in general, I see somebody who is like at best, complicit in human trafficking and pedophilia, and at best condoning it. Or at absolute worst condoning it. You know what I mean? But you have that group of people who have seen what has been happening for the last year for sure, but like I mentioned, for many years prior to this, the unfolding of ICE, the standing army that the architects of this very nation warned against, and they're heavily policing of the peoples of this country, right? But they've been okay with it because they're not fucking Americans, because they're quote unquote illegal, because they're immigrants, and that because they think wrongly that because they aren't that, because they are American citizens, because they aren't illegal, because they aren't even quote unquote breaking the law, that they're going to be exempt from the boomerang effect. And that is not what's going to happen. It is just not what's going to happen. It's never happened historically in the last 500 years of this colonial project, right? Not just here in the United States, but around the world. It has not happened, okay, where one group of people is somehow exempt, right, from the boomerang effect. I mean, there will be a group of people who will be exempt from it. We know who they are. They're the bourgeoisie, the ones who are implementing it, right? This weapon of class war against everybody, right? They'll be exempt from it. But you won't, MAGA supporter, just because you're a MAGA supporter today. So yeah, you got what you wanted for today, right? But let's check back in 5 years when the shit that's been normalized today is now being enforced upon everybody who does not do exactly what it is that the United States government has told them to do. And that's exactly what this Rene Good situation has brought to the forefront, dog. Again, these right-wing grifters, bro. Like I mentioned in the previous episode, I follow them like just to see where the fuck their dumbass mind is at, dog. You know what? Let me take it back. I'm not trying to be. I really am not, and I'm going to talk about this. Like I'm trying to work through this shit on my own too. I'm not perfect, dog. Right? What's that song? I'm not a perfect person. I think it's a mistake, right? Anyways, I'm not a perfect person, so I'm trying to work to like undo this myself. So forgive me. I apologize. Like let me backtrack that violently divisive statement towards working class people. You might be right wing, dog, and I might not like what you agree with, but that doesn't make you a dumbass, right? That just means there's some sort of barrier in between us that we have to be able to cross. Whether it's both of us crossing it or not, that's a different story, right? And yes, the irony of the Mexican being the one jumping across the border, me, right, to communicate to the right wingers is not lost on me. I get it, right? But whatever the case, I'm gonna talk about this in a bit. It's actually an idea that was introduced to me by my former PhD advisor. She was a dissertation advisor. Her name was Jennifer Clifton. Amazing, incredible woman, bro. An amazing, incredible scholar. And she wrote this book called Arguing Across Borders, Dialogues of Differences. And that's basically what it's about. It's like being able to communicate with people who are across different ideological borders than we are, right? So it's not even like even just physical borders anymore, but we're talking about ideological borders. So left-right, the left-right paradigm. You know what I mean? And again, I'll mention it. I'll talk about it a little bit more when the time comes. But for now, the basic idea. Let me apologize for calling you a dumbass. Just because you're a right wing doesn't mean you are. I'm sure I believe that. I really do. Right? And I'm trying to work towards becoming better at it. Right? Because I'm not trying to. Yeah, I don't want to be a hypocrite. I don't want to come up here and be like, we're team people, and then turn around and say, fuck you if you don't agree with me though. No, I'm not trying to do that. And I understand, like, we all have that within us. For sure, I'm no exception. So, like, I was mindful of it. I'm trying to undo it, right? So let me start that part over. The point that I'm trying to say is, again, let me further contextualize it. Let me further lick it before I stick it, right? This isn't conspiratorial drivel. This is philosophy, bro. This is like actual real philosophy, not that bullshit philosophy. Like, if my partner in a simulated world in one of the other many infinite possible realms is cheating on me, does that mean my partner in this realm here is cheating on me too? Fuck you. That shit's irrelevant. You know what's relevant? The dual state theory. Why? Because we're living that shit. You're never going to live in a simulated world like, you know what I mean? Or in one of the many infinite dimension worlds like some Rick and Morty type shit. You're living in this one right here, right now. And in this world right here, right now, the dual state theory, the boomerang effect, all that shit is happening as in real time. Okay? So just to further like exemplify not exemplify, but to further clarify the name of what it is that the current MAGA peoples are supporting, it's the dual state theory, dog. This like, so it's complex, and I'm going to break it down like just really simply, right? And I'll delve into it in a further episode. But basically, it's like a two-tiered justice system where you have people, the quote-unquote American citizens in this scenario that I've been, rambling on for about 10 minutes now. And then the non-American citizens, right? Who are experiencing full force, firsthand rather, in full force, the effects of the Imperial Boomerang here on this land in the United States of America. But because they're not citizens, you look at them and you say, well, fuck you. You should have come here legally, right? Completely oblivious to the fact that you, me, and every other fucking person that's part of the colonial country in which sent off the boomerang in the first place are going to feel it inevitably. As was the unfortunate case of Rene Good. Bro. Again, before I started getting back off on this little ramble here, these fucking grifter accounts, they're grifters. I don't give a fuck. I'll call them grifters. Right? I won't call them dumbasses, but I'll call them grifters, no problem. These right-wing grifter accounts, bro, and I'm going to talk about this in a little bit more detail when I get to the ideas on Venezuela. But for now, I'll just introduce it by stating that, they have been appealing to an underswell of disenfranchised youth who are frustrated with the material conditions and their lack of prospects that it's going to give them for their future. Which, again, this is again, history, dog. The understanding of history is so important here. We've seen this before. This is how World War II basically kicks off, right? So now that we're here on the heels of an impending World War III and we're seeing the same cycles unfold, it's like, bro, like we have one of two options. We can either go down this road that we know exactly where it ends, or we can work to try to fucking, try to right the ship, if you will, and try to overcome it in as best way as possible. And you have, these people on the right who are pandering, they're grifters. They're pandering to these disenfranchised youth and telling them things like, the reason shit is so miserable for you is because women are whores. And, that the whoredom, if you will, the quote unquote whoredom that women are now, engaging in is a direct result of feminism, which was introduced by Jewish academics to purposely undermine and subvert American Christian culture. Like, that's the whole movement right now in the right-wing spectrum. And it's just like, bro, okay, first of all, fuck everything you just said. It's all wrong. Like, straight up, it's just wrong, dog. Okay? For one, first and foremost, if you're relying on fucking centuries of patriarchy, essentially, to get laid, like, you're the problem. You are the problem, right? Let's take some of that accountability that Americans, we love so much, right? And rugged individualism. Pull yourself up by your bootstraps, take a shower, get a fucking personality, and then women will be attracted to you. Don't rely on fucking patriarchy to spread your shitty genes moving forward, right? Because the shitty genes of people, let's not go down that rabbit hole, because then we're going to open up a whole ass can of worms, right? Eugenics. But, so first and foremost, we'll start with that part. Second of all, like, there's nothing wrong with empowering women, dog, okay? Third of all, look, man, Jews have contributed some incredible ideas to the fucking world, and to just dismiss that because of their, ethnicity, that's the anti-Semitic part, right? It's one thing to be anti-Zionist. That's no problem, dog. What is anti-Zionist? That's anti-belief that certain people are superior to other groups of people and have the ability to enforce that ideology on the world through physical force. No. We're not that. That's anti-Zionism. But anti-Semitism is saying we're not going to ascribe to these fucking ideas just because a Jewish scholar introduced it. Who gives a fuck if they're Jewish scholars, dog? If what they're saying is true, that's what merits discussion. And it's very much true that this United States Christian nation is predicated on the subjugation of women. So why are we going to just dismiss that because it was written by groups of people, rather, from a small group of individuals, or rather a small group of people that you don't like? No, we're not doing that, okay? Anyways, so that just to address that part right there real quickly. And then getting back to the grifters. So they'll say things like, we need to return to tradition. What's the return to tradition? They want to do things like have women return to conservative traditional roles, gender roles. They want to undo usury, right? Lending of money with interests. They want to, let's see what else real quick. What else did I write here? Give me 1 second. So I don't really know, like these these right-wing values are so foreign to me. I don't have them on top of my dome. Give me a second. Oh yeah, okay, cool. So I'm talking here about so I'll just get into it. I'll introduce it now, and then we'll circle back around to it. I was gonna mention how later in the thought on Venezuela, but I guess I'll do it now to help me, put across these right-wing values and these grifter accounts who say things like they're against non-traditional gender roles, they're against things like usury, and the next one, they're against things like pornography, right? And that they're allegedly Christian, which would mean that they at least would care about things like healthcare, and, housing, etc., right? But if the toppling and the kidnapping, essentially, of Maduro, right? When they kidnapped Maduro, what they basically did was they overthrew a nation that outlawed pornography. Oh, here's some more, right off the top of my head, now that I'm remembering. Venezuela outlawed pornography. They outlawed usury, which I've already mentioned those two, right? But they also outlawed homosexuality. They also outlawed trans people, right? So these are all things that the right wing allegedly cares about. You know what I'm saying? But when it came to Hugo Chavez, they not only do they care about this, but they look at Jewish people and they say it's because of you people that now these things are prevalent, right? And it's like, okay, let's entertain that idea. Let's examine it and see if it holds any merit. But why then are you in turn celebrating, and this is what I was talking about, the grifters, and we'll get back to it here shortly. Why then are you in turn celebrating the toppling of a country, their leadership, that outlawed those very things? Like, what moral high ground do you think that you have where you can sit here on one hand and complain about these alleged vices and then turn around and celebrate the toppling of a government that outlawed them, right? Like you're revealing yourself for what you are, which is a hypocrite at best, right? You are quite clearly, you're just this patriotism. It's always masked under the guy. Everything that I just told you right now on these right wing accounts, it's always masked under the guise of patriotism. Like, we got to take our country back type shit, right? But it's always only ever been thinly veiled racism. And, picking up on historical tropes that we've already seen, for those of us who have studied it, unfold. You know what I mean? Which is why it was so easy to call out and be like, hey, we've done this before and this is what that is. And of course we get accused of being bleeding heart liberals. And it's like, no, we're just predicting the eventual inevitable return of the Imperial Boomerang. And you are celebrating it right now because you're not on the receiving end. But it will come back, dog. And it will fucking get you every single time, right? Which, again, brings us back to the Rene Good situation. You have these people who fashion themselves as American patriots who are celebrating a standing army in their country, our country, that just blasted an American citizen for, again, I won't get into the video because I'll watch it eventually, dog, but I don't want to see someone get blasted anymore. We've all gone through our fucking, our gore phases. You know what I mean? At a certain point, it's all right, man, I don't really need to keep up with this shit anymore. You know what I mean? The Charlie Kirk situation, that was, even for me, bro, I was like, that's too much, man. I don't want to be seeing this type of shit. You know what I'm saying? And to have it proliferated the way it was so prominently online, it's like, man, do we really need to be doing this right now type shit? So the same with Rene Good. It's like, I'm aware, I saw the video briefly. I know the ins and outs, but I haven't. And I'm only qualifying it for the people who are like, well, why didn't she obey? Fuck you, you're a bootlicker, first and foremost, right? Or the people who are like, she hit that cop first. And that's the more important one. I don't know. I haven't seen the video, so the time will come when I do so, right? But what I will say is that to celebrate it, here's another one. This is how I got onto this tangent in the first place, just so we're clear. I was trying to, I didn't want to just outwardly state it. I wanted to lay the foundation, which is why I introduced the whole, alleged values that are currently propagating right-wing extremist social media. And one of the things that they're so concerned about is the declining birth rate of European Americans, or just Europeans in general. They look around the world and they'll be like, oh, our birth rates are declining globally, while the birth rates of people in India and China are increasing exponentially. And then they'll introduce like the really racialized component when they'll say, you have all these white women who are attracted to non-white men and they are race traders and they're mixing our blood and all that kind of shit, right? Which is inevitably where you get shit like the white supremacist nonsense where they start talking about we must secure a future for white children type shit, right? Okay. You say you're concerned with this. You say you're concerned with this. Big brain moment time, right? There's declining birth rates. But you're celebrating the fucking blatant assassination of a white woman because she was not complying, which is the spirit of this American project, just so we're clear. America was built on non-compliance. It was built on fucking revolution. You're celebrating that person was fucking blasted by a armed jackbooted thug of the standing army that the fucking architects of this country warned about just because she wasn't fucking obeying orders. This was a white woman, dog. And so if you're so concerned about this falling birth rate, that's one of the, you need those. You need white women in order to help with this alleged crisis that you all are facing. So like, which one is it? Are you concerned about the falling birth rates, or are you concerned with just establishing like this authoritarian dictatorship under the guise of patriotism, which itself is a thinly veiled guise for your fucking racism and misogyny? And the ultimate point here being is like, again, bro, at first my initial response to this, when I saw this Rene Good news break essentially, was damn, dog. And this is like just a real reaction. They fucking blasted a white woman, bro. A white man blasted a white woman. You know what I mean? This is like this is a reaction. This is like an organic reaction for those living outside of the United States who are listening to this, to what it's like being a non-white person experiencing this. Someone from the hood, right? And the reason why, twofold, because as I just mentioned right now, we know how much they value, allegedly, right? The bodies, at least, of white women, right? And if they're willing to blast one, like that shows they're not fucking around, dog. And this is where the next reaction comes into play, because if they're willing to kill a white woman, the fuck are they going to do to us? Then the answer is simple. It is worse than what she received. You know what I mean? Not worse, but because she got murdered, bro. She got murdered. It's a state-sanctioned execution. Trump truthed it. He came out and said, he basically gave these ICE agents free reign to act with lethal force moving forward, because he basically said if she hadn't been fucking around, this wouldn't have happened. So it's going to just give like further credence to, you know, future actions by these ICE agents. And because they're directed towards our communities, the immigrant communities, the non-white communities, they're going to exercise it in its full force. And they have the legitimacy now of the United States government, because the president, the supreme law of the land, the spokesman for the supreme law of the land, has basically said, if you resist in any form, or if you try to intervene in any way with the actions of these ICE agents, you will face the full repercussions, and we're not going to fucking defend you. That's the Imperial Boomerang, bro. That's the Imperial Boomerang here in the United States of America. Again, everyone was on board with it when it was happening to Palestinians, when it was happening to immigrants, but now it's subtly being introduced to American citizens as well. And the bootlickers are celebrating it because they're not aware yet that it's going to inevitably fucking, it's going to square its sights entirely on them soon enough, bro. Right? And that's where, you know, you start getting back into this idea. Like, you start looking into the formations of not just ICE. There was that one, you know, X has that ability now to be able to see where accounts are created. And someone pulled up the receipts for ICE. They were created in Tel Aviv, the X account, right? And beyond that, like, there's plenty of receipts that demonstrate the ways in which ICE has been in operation with the IOF. So it's not like, again, it's so easy to dismiss this as a conspiracy theory. But at what point can you start to say, like, yeah, dog, they're acting at the very least in conjunction with, and at the very worst, perhaps potentially even at the expense of, or rather at the behest of, the Israeli state. You know what I mean? I'm talking about here ICE, dog. And more directly, the reason why is because ICE themselves is now also starting to use the Palantir technology that I was speaking about, which was implemented and perfected in Palestine and now being implemented here by ICE in the United States of America. Now, this isn't the episode specifically to delve into details about what it is that that program was and Palantir in general, but I will just state this. It's important for us to, at the very least, look at who's running Palantir, right? Which, of course, is Big Daddy Karp, first and foremost, right? The CEO, who is an openly admitted Zionist, right? Which, again, according to the ADL, according to them, is just an anti-Semitic way of calling him a Jewish person. No, dude, we have plenty of Christian Zionists here, non-Jewish people who are openly Zionist, right? But in the case of Palantir, yeah, is it Alex Karp? Sorry, I just know his name is Karp. Give me 1 second. Yeah, Alex Karp, right? So who has openly, demonstrated his full allegiance to the Zionist project in the Middle East. And then you look deeper into it. Well, who funded it? Alex Karp is the CEO. Who created it? Peter Thiel, dog. Peter Thiel, right? Who is, again, on record himself as stating, I defer to Israel on these matters. Whatever Israel says, that's what we're going to do. And if this alleged conspiracy that the white supremacists are so concerned with about the undermining and subverting of traditional American values is to be believed, that should be what they're concerned about. That should be what they're concerned about, right? But they're not. Their focus is entirely on the immigrant community. And that's why I'm stating, my concern is always with the immigrant community. It's always been with what I'm concerned with. In line with as much as it was that I was discussing prior to the technical issues, okay? So I'll summarize, and basically what I was discussing is how, the rise of the right-wing grifters, essentially, okay? And I discussed, a lot of things, man. It's unfortunate that the audio went to shit, but let me just start with this part. The dialogue across differences, the jumping across the border, if you will. And, the irony of how me, as the Mexican boy, is the one doing so in order to reach the right-wingers, essentially, right? I'll hopefully try to, before it's too late. And not trying to be alarmist, but that's what it is, because we've seen this already unfold, where throughout historical, the past is no indicator of the future. I get it, right? However, what we're experiencing is not new in terms of political and financial material unrest, okay? We've seen the right-wing grifters, for instance, who pander essentially to a disenfranchised youth who feel as though they've been robbed of a future that they deserved, and terrible consequences that come from this, right? So right now we're seeing it unfold, for instance, by way of these right-wing Instagram accounts. Again, I'm getting onto Twitter too, so on X, whatever. So I see it there as well. Instagram is just a default, obviously, because that's where I spend most of my attention. But they pander to these disenfranchised young men who, feel as though, and perhaps in many instances rightfully so, that they've had their future stolen from them. But what they, always focus on, these grifters, is on how what stole their future from them was feminism, Jewish feminist philosophers, academics in general, and their what they consider to be the attack of the subversion of Christianity and Western Christian values as a whole, right? And that's certainly a way of reading what's happening, right? But another way is that these very right-wing accounts who have betrayed any sort of moral high ground that they have, as mentioned, I hope, through the part of the podcast that I've already addressed with Maduro and the toppling of the government, how, just to reiterate in case it didn't save, you had this country who outlawed pornography, outlawed usury, outlawed homosexuality, outlawed trans peoples, and a lot of the other things that right-wingers are allegedly, in such concern, are so highly concerned about, and who they feel, these right-wingers, that these are all values that were introduced by Jewish thinkers, right? Which is just, that's blatant anti-Semitism, right there. That's clear anti-Semitism, which I'm not trying to make a very clear distinction between what I'm doing. I'm not doing that. I can admit, Jewish philosophers have contributed an immense amount of incredible ideas to not only the history of philosophy, but Jewish thinkers as a whole have also contributed great insights to humanity, right? So when they say shit Jewish people are responsible for introducing abortion to the United States of America, and it's ultimately still up to, dudes to keep their dick in their pants, and women, if you don't want to get pregnant, to take the steps necessary to ensure that doesn't happen. You know what I mean? Like this idea. And on top of that, if it does happen, you as an American citizen don't have the right to tell another American what to do with their body. You know what I mean? That's my belief on the matter. And to simply blame Jewish people for introducing, abortion into America, like that's just lazy thinking, bro. That's the those are the anti-Semitic canards that we can't take you seriously anymore. Because what you've essentially revealed yourself as, this fake front for patriotism, has been revealed for this thinly veiled racism that has always existed. And the idea then is that instead of blaming all these issues on, that we're experiencing right now on women, on feminists, on Jewish thinkers, etc., take accountability, dog. And the accountability here is the role that you're playing in allowing for the fucking occupying army in the form of ICE to continue its fucking, ever increasing presence on our streets. So much so to the point where they are now killing American citizens, right? White women, as I mentioned before, like, and in case I didn't, just bears repeating, they're so concerned about the dwindling white population around the world, but you're celebrating the murder of a white woman, which again is, what's necessary to help with increasing the population of European Americans, or Europeans essentially, that you're so concerned losing globally, right? But you're celebrating it because allegedly, according to you, she was, not following orders. She should have done what she was told. She shouldn't have tried to attack the police officer. Like, all those things could potentially be true. However, this is the United States of America. And if it was true, she deserved a trial by a jury of her peers with evidence to determine her guilt. And on top of that, she deserved the ability to have a trial that could lead to a fair punishment for her alleged infraction. What she didn't deserve is to get fucking shot in the face for doing what she did, right? By standing an agent of the standing army that is now, again, just in case it didn't save, the very fucking nightmare that the original architects of this country warned about, right? Why don't you take accountability for that, right? Why don't you take accountability for the role that you all are playing in allowing for those things to happen here on this land, as opposed to justifying it because of, again, your thinly veiled racism? The audio technical difficulties with this episode is obscene, bro. Like, just so many issues that are unfolding. So if the audio just keeps like slipping in and out, I've done basically everything that I can at this point, aside from, straight up hitting it on the fucking, like in Zoolander, the little, the two chimps, the homage to, what is it, that Kubrick movie, I forget the name of it, where they're hitting the Apple computer, right? Trying to get the files from the inside of the computer. That's basically what I've reverted to at this point in the podcast. I'll figure out the audio difficulties before the next episode. But for now, I'll just summarize it because it wasn't intended to be a long episode anyways. So I'll just summarize the concerns. The concerns is that we're celebrating, bootlickers are celebrating the Imperial Boomerang on American soil. And they have all sorts of excuses, all sorts of justifications for it. At the most extreme end of the spectrum, again, they blame it on feminism, anti-Semitic, accusations, and just all around, like, straight up white nationalism. There's just one account that I follow just to see the kind of fucking bullshit that they're on. That was talking about how, the lady that got blasted, even though she was a white woman, she was a race traitor. And according to them, not according, she was, but because she was a lesbian, that makes her even less, important. Which again is just like the purity politics on the right is just obscene, and it's inevitably going to be their downfall. Which, good riddance, because we don't need those people anyways. We don't want those people. If you're one of those people and you're potentially listening to this, and I can hope to try to sway you to believe otherwise, but at the end of the day, I'm not going to try to befriend somebody who is violently against my existence or the existence of people that I value. You know what I mean? Much less rather, if they're celebrating the Imperial Boomerang being implemented here on American soil and thinking that they're going to be, spared from its consequences just because of the benefits that they're currently exhibiting by way of the dual state theory, which again, just to emphasize, if I'm repeating these things because I don't know how much of the audio has been compromised, but the idea here is that, they only feel that way because they're convinced that they're going to be immune from the consequences of the Imperial Boomerang, but they're not. It's just a matter of time before it gets to them as well. And when it does, they have one of two options. They can continue to blame women, minorities, etc., or they can take a fucking good, hard, earnest look in the mirror and accept the fact that they themselves are every bit as responsible for the return of the Imperial Boomerang as the people who, sent it off into the world and inevitably returning back here in the first place, right? My concern is not just from an American citizen perspective, seeing the boomerang effect in full effect with Sarah Good. At best, we can just hope that this is an isolated incident and that it could help people come to their senses on both sides. This is the dialogue across differences that I was talking about earlier about the book. It's like, look, man, there's only two ways out of this. There really is. One is through bloodshed and the other one is through discourse. I don't want bloodshed. I don't. I don't want civil war and I don't want global war. I don't want it. You know what I mean? So because of that, I have a choice. And the choice is I can either foment discontent between the two parties in America, or I can work to try to overcome the differences by dialoguing, hence dialogue across differences, right? To build the bridge, if you will, to help, ease some sort of the tensions in hopes of de-escalating the vitriol that is being, tossed between both camps, which I'm not even a part of. I'm not even a part of either one of those sides, but I am still beholden to the effects that they have on my life because I'm an American. You know what I mean? So when I see shit like an American citizen, a woman, European woman, European American getting blasted by ICE, it's concerning. Like, no, hey man, this is getting, again, the best case scenario is that this is an isolated incident and it won't happen again. But when you have the president of the United States, the highest authority of the land, tweeting through truth, essentially, that his, he essentially gave a green light for it, saying that anyone that interferes with ICE conducting their operations is justified. That emboldens the ICE agents, and that jeopardizes everybody. And that's first and foremost. And then secondly, as I was mentioning, hopefully it got caught on the audio, because of the foundations of hood philosophy in response to, growing up navigating colonial terror, my concern is intimately with the immigrant, quote unquote, immigrant community. Because I am the descendant of immigrants, right? Quote unquote immigrants. And more importantly, like the El Paso borderland is that's what it's made of, dog. Like, what the fuck? You can't sit here and say that you were against a Walmart shooting and then support what's currently happening. Like, if you are complicit in both. And so what I mean by that is, like, again, if I already said this, I apologize, but I just want to make sure, dog. My initial reaction was fear. Like, bro, they killed a white woman. They're not fucking around. If they blasted her, they're going to have no problem doing the same to the rest of us. None at all whatsoever. All those protests that we seen in, like Los Angeles, for instance, a couple months back, now we know what they're capable of. And I'm not saying this in terms of like, prepare yourself accordingly, but I am in the sense of like, I don't mean like you better strap up and go out. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is be aware. Be aware. Because they're not fucking around anymore, dog. They never were. And it sucks because it's gonna hit our community first. It's gonna hit our community first. But it sucks in general because it's gonna hit humanity as a whole, bro. Like, again, this is a human issue. The Imperial Boomerang spares none. Doesn't matter where you are. It will hit everyone eventually. And I don't want that. I don't want that. Hence the whole desire to have dialogue across differences. And I emphasize this because, in returning back to the shit that I talked about in the previous episode of the podcast, I didn't qualify it by talking about this, which is important because if you're listening to it as a standalone episode, it's very easy to see how I could potentially be aligned with right-wing values, but it's not true. It's just not true, right? It's simply an understanding that, look, man, compromise entails you can't just force your view on other people. You have to take into account the things that they're concerned about. One of the things that the right wing is concerned about is establishing borders and having law and order, which seems violently anti-immigrant initially, right? But that discounts the role of indigenous law and borders that, our ancestors had. Again, we got to dispel ourselves of this noble savage myth, and we have to recognize that, our ancestors, they were every bit as much human as we are here today, which means they had laws, they had borders, they had nations, and they enforced all of those. You know what I mean? This is not a European construct. This is a human issue. And I'm not here to justify either so much as it is to say, like, you can't just point at people and say that they're fucking racist for wanting to put up a border. You have to have fucking actual reasoning why. And more importantly, if we want to live collectively together in harmony, which I do, right? How else can we flourish in life individually if, everyone else isn't experiencing the same? You have to be willing to compromise. You have to be willing to take into account that some people are concerned about shit that you don't agree with. But if the overall intention is the general amount of good for the most amount of people, unfortunately, you have to take into consideration the opinions of other people and potentially even be willing to enact them, right? I'm not arguing for mass deportations. I'm not arguing for fucking any other of the right-wing extremist nonsense. I'm just saying that, unfortunately, there are people who do want to see criminals deported. And if you can't, at the very least, agree that that's not a bad thing, then maybe you have yourself some reflection to do in terms of asking yourself, well, why? Why do I feel that it's a bad thing to have criminals who have openly flaunted and broken the law deported? And of course, this opens up a floodgates because they'll be like, anyone that comes here illegally is a criminal. It's not the same. It's not a felony. That's a misdemeanor akin to jaywalking, right? I'm talking about, like the example that I gave before, people that kill people that, get drunk and, smash into people that don't have the necessary documents to be here type shit. You know what I mean? I'm not even saying that you have to agree with the right wingers. I'm just saying that at the very least, you have to entertain why it is you actually disagree and maybe consider if there is some merit to what it is that they're concerned about, in hopes of ultimately bridging the divide and continuing to move forward in as constructive a manner as possible. So, with that said, I wanted to move on really quickly. Again, at this point, I'm just going to summarize because I don't want to risk losing any more of the audio. I'm not going to summarize in a way that's going to do a disservice to what I'm trying to talk about, because what I'm trying to talk about, I believe, is incredibly important, which is why I wanted to talk about it in the first place. And that is what's happening in Venezuela. This is I didn't come up with this. I learned this myself. And when I learned it, it really helped me understand so much more what it is exactly that, this settler colonial country, the United States, truly is. And that is, of course, one nation under God. One nation under gods, right? This gives the pretense of the Abrahamic Christian God, but it's never been that. It's always been acronym for guns, oil, drugs, and sex by way of human trafficking. And when we start to look at the United States less as this project that is the result of the spirit of revolution, manifesting itself on this land, and more so as an extension of a criminal enterprise that emerged in, the 15 and 1600s, it makes it a lot easier to understand just current geopolitical events. Okay. In my opinion, for me personally, one of the justifications, for instance, that was given for the kidnapping of Maduro from Venezuela was that he was a narco-terrorist, which is hilarious because the United States itself is built on narco-terrorism. And I'm not even talking about currently right now in the form of the families who have made a fortune off of the OxyContin epidemic, for instance. I'm talking about the actual literal foundation of this country, bro. I had this, again, I have like a whole part written out, but because of the audio and I don't want to risk jeopardizing it anymore, I'm just going to summarize it. But it was basically going to talk about like the opium wars. It is the opium wars. Essentially, it was a conversation on the opium wars and the role that they played in the foundation of prominent American families who have, parlayed that fortune that they made peddling drugs to the Chinese people and use that money to become influential politicians to this day. I had a whole list of people in mind, right? But for now, I'll just because I want to make sure the audio is good. And I'll return to this one in the next episode. But the most famous one is FDR, President Franklin Delano Roosevelt, right? His parents and his grandparents, specifically his grandfather, was deeply, deeply invested in the smuggling of opium into China, into and out of China. And his grandfather used the wealth that was generated through those opium trafficking to achieve upward mobility for his family. So much so that he was able to secure a grandchild who would invariably go on to become the president of the United States of America. And the irony that this president turned out to be one of the most draconian, the author of some of the most draconian drug laws that are still in effect in America to this day, that are disproportionately affecting peoples in the hood, cannot be overstated, right? This is a family that made its fortune off smuggling drugs, that, their grandchild passed legislation that is still affecting people in the hood to this day. And it wasn't, it's not the Roosevelt. It's not just the Roosevelts alone, bro. I'll go with these two. So we have first the Roosevelts, right? But the second one is also the Skull and Bone Society. So it's the people, one of the sons who founded the Skull and Bone Society, which is William Huntington Russell. So the name of the company that the Roosevelts worked with was the Russell Company, right? And that was the company that was smuggling drugs to China, opium to China, right? And the heir to that, like the actual owner of that company, his name was William Huntington Russell. And along with another gentleman by the name of Alphonso Taft, somehow I'm sure related to President Taft, they went on to form the Skull and Bone Society. Let's see, is that Harvard, Yale? Yeah, Yale, right? Which, of course, for those of us who are immersed in the quote unquote conspiracy theory circles, know that the Skull and Bones, the secret society that has given rise to many, many U.S. politicians, including former presidents, George Bush, John Kerry, not a president, but prominent member of the American government, cousins with George Bush, right? But has also given rise to heads of CIA, just deeply immersed in the American deep state, essentially, right? All of which was funded with drug money, bro. Forbes magazine, their family, also funded through drug money, right? So the irony of the pretense of this American government looking at another country and saying that they're narco-terrorists, it's like, bro, weren't you the ones that helped launder money that you made by importing drugs into the inner city communities of 1980s and 1990s America? And you helped people sell those drugs and disperse those drugs to the community? And you used the money that was raised by those drugs to fund right-wing death squads in Central America? Aren't you the ones that did the Contra Costa? Is that itself not a form of narco-terrorism? Like, what are we doing here, bro? So again, between the historical precedent and what's currently unfolding right now, if it isn't just so obvious that what they're doing with Venezuela has nothing to do with narco-terrorism and what they're trying to do in Mexico with narco-terrorism, and rather everything to do with this continued desire to gain control of all the natural resources on the planet. It is, quite frankly, a continued class war that is being waged on the working class around the world. But again, because of this dual state theory, we think that because we're Americans and that these people are operating at the behest of the American government, that somehow we're going to benefit from it. We are not. We are not. They will get cheaper gas and they will still sell it to us at a fucking exorbitant rate because all they care about is trying to milk us for as much of our resources as possible. And again, the upsetting part is like, it's upsetting, but, you know, so I learned something recently through our ancestral studies that, you know, it kind of gave me a little bit of motivation per se, a little bit of just like, I don't know, it just keep it up, just type shit. You know what I mean? And it's basically talking about how it could be discouraging to sit here and rant seemingly into the void, which I know I'm not, which is why I started this podcast talking about how I'm not in the first place, right? But it could seem that way to be just talking about this type of shit and then not see perhaps any sort of change. But that's okay though. And you know, this first part that I'm going to mention, like it is ancestral, but it's not something I learned recently and it's not unique to us. It's just the understanding that the person who, you know, what's that great quote? The person who plants the tree with no expectations to sit underneath its shade type shit. You know what I mean? And also the part that I did just learn recently is just talking about how the responsibility that people in my position have towards spreading knowledge and awareness and information. And how despite the validation, I guess is the best way of saying it, but also despite the seeming change that we desire being implemented, that doesn't mean that the effects aren't being felt. Because so our ancestors, they understood consciousness to be a tripartite structure. So you have like our waking consciousness, our istak quetzalcoatl, right? Our white quetzalcoatl. This consciousness right here, right? But then we also have an unconscious. And then even deeper than our unconscious, we have our subconscious. And that is like the deepest layer of our consciousness, the yayauki tezcatlipoca, right? And what this was telling us is that is always operating. Always. It's always working. We are always learning. We are always processing at the deepest, most subconscious of levels. So it could become discouraging. It seems seemingly discouraging to talk about this type of shit and not see it implemented in any way or perhaps even reverberating in any meaningful way. But that's not true. And I don't just say this for myself. I say this for you as well. If you take this information or you have similar thoughts and have been sharing them with your family and your friends, and you might feel a little bit disenfranchised and discouraged because there doesn't seem to be any, you know, tangible results for doing so. It's not true. The deepest levels of ourselves, the deepest levels of our subconscious are processing this information, is processing this information. And invariably, it will make its way to the istak quetzalcoatl, to our waking consciousness. And the hope is that in doing so, we'll, you know, by sharing this type of information from this particular angle, for the people who are engaging with it, that it will be filtered and polished in a way that is, you know, more conducive to a globalized, you know, community under, or just rather, I don't want to say globalized because that invokes the current political contextualization that it has, right? So I'll say rather collectivization of humanity, like the collective human spirit type shit. You know what I mean? That, you know, by listening to this podcast and to ideas like from people who might share or have similar ideas as this, you know, to people who don't, they still resonate. And the hope is that they'll be filtered through your perspective, through my perspective, that could potentially help them, you know, or at the very least offer an alternative to the general pathway which has been carved, which is the right-wing authoritarianism that I've discussed at length on this podcast, particularly through the episodes on Marcuse, right? But anyways, the whole point here is like, I know most people don't really fuck with Maduro and have probably never even, you know, listened to shit that he has to say. So I wanted to just share a couple of quick clips of what it is that he had actually been talking about. And, you know, just for the sake of putting it out there, let's say. So we'll start with this one first and foremost. King of the Gripers, de las 12 tribus, que no son los que mandan hoy en el Estado de Israel. So this is him speaking on the state of Israel, right? And he starts by just stating he's talking about the quote unquote 12 tribes of Israel. The ones that govern today. And then he continues to say, Netanyahu is not an authentic Jew. keep in mind, this is something a lot of people don't know. Maduro is ethnically Jewish himself, right? He's mixed with like one of the indigenous populations of Venezuela and Jewish. So he's ethnically Jewish himself. He goes on to say, speaking of Netanyahu, he is a scoundrel. And this is his words, not mine. I mean, for those of you who speak Spanish, you can understand. And I'll put the YouTube audio up as well, the video up as well. He calls Netanyahu a scoundrel who comes from Poland. For those who like to talk about religion and say that this is a religious conflict, no, this is not a religious conflict, Maduro says. El conflicto que hay desde la fundación del Estado de Israel es un conflicto geopolítico. The conflict that exists since the establishment of the State of Israel is a geopolitical issue. Porque ese Estado lo crearon para conquistar todo el Medio Oriente y Asia Central. Because the State of Israel was established to conquer all of the Middle East and Central Asia. Quitarle las riquezas y colonizar esos pueblos. And take away their riches and colonize those hoods. El proyecto sionista que dicen que van desde el río Jordán hasta el Éufrates. It is the Zionist project that they say runs from Jordan to the Euphrates and beyond. Y más allá. De las 12 tribus. So, just a little bit more insight into this, it just is, it's so easy to just dismiss it as narco-terrorism. And it's such a convenient reading. It's such a lazy reading. It's important to dig deeper into it, right? So there's one more that I wanted to share real quickly. And this is him, Maduro, speaking on the plans of American empire operating on behest of Israel, essentially. So again, the whole, just to tie it into the very beginning while I'm even introducing it, it's easy to say, oh, that's an anti-Semitic conspiracy theory when you say that the United States is an occupied government. Bro, governments around the world have been saying this for literally the entirety of the existence of the State of Israel, right? And the idea here is at what point can we start actually discussing this, like understanding this as a potential, something that needs to at the very least be discussed, right? And not just dismissed as a quote unquote conspiracy because it's inconvenient. Like, because if this is actually what's truly happening, we as people, we as citizens of this country for sure, but of the world, of humanity, we have a right to know so that we can act in accordance to our own free will and our own volition and have choices that actually reflect our own desires rather than those of the people who fashion themselves as, the masters of mankind acting at our behest. So there's Maduro talking again. He's talking about how they want to finish with the whole Muslim world, essentially. Sembrado una ideología and put him on trial in American. Let me start this over. Odio de la racia. Ahora el odio de la racia. Ahora los racistas y supremacistas del sionismo hoy quieren acabar con el pueblo palestino. Y digo más, quieren acabar con todo el pueblo árabe, con todo el pueblo musulmán. Han sembrado una ideología del odio, de la racia. He goes on to say that they have established a ideology of racism and of theft, essentially. Han sembrado durante 75 años. For the last 75 years. Con el apoyo de Occidente. With the support of the West. Atención, mundo bueno, que me escucha. Atención, hombres y mujeres de los Estados Unidos. He goes on to say, attention, good people of the world who are listening to me. Attention, men and women of the United States of America. Europa y del mundo. Of Europe and the world. Una ideología más peligrosa que la nazi. They have sown an ideology more dangerous than Nazism. Primero contra el pueblo palestino. First against the Palestinian people. Racia, exterminio, genocidio, bombas atómicas. Plundering raids, extermination, genocide, and atomic bombs. Y luego contra vienen los pueblos árabes, todos los pueblos musulmanes. Y después, next, it will be all the Arab nations and the Muslim world. Quieran venir por nosotros, los cristianos, los católicos. Then they will come for us, the Christians and the Catholics. Paremos al tiempo el genocidio. Let's stop the genocide in time. Paremos a tiempo el genocidio sionista contra el amado y pueblo palestino. We must stop the Zionist people from continuing their genocide against the beloved Zionist people. So again, it's like, I guess if I was to summate, essentially, just to like wrap this bitch up, because it's been very sporadic given all the issues that I've had. But if I could wrap it up, the basic idea is everything that I've introduced to you today, it's not new. It's not me. It's not like uniquely Western philosophy. This is shit material conditions have made people think about from around the world, that people have been telling us, global leaders have been telling us for a long time. The United States, at the behest of, the state of Israel, is an existential threat to all of humanity. And we need to do something about it, essentially. Because if you think you can just sit back and let this shit unfold without it affecting you, you're sorely mistaken. And history shows that. And it's only a matter of time before it does. So at the very least, you should be concerned with this because of your own self, interest. But at best, you should be concerned about it as just a fucking global citizen with, shared essence of humanity that understands that regardless of the arbitrariness of our, differences, the color of our skin, our religion, etc., that we should care for one another because at the core, we are all still people. You know what I'm saying? And the moral imperative, I guess, is the best way to end it, that we have in ensuring that anything that is vehemently against the collective spirit of humanity should at the very least be confronted ideologically, for sure, at the very least, ideologically, right? And when I mean confronted, I don't mean like in a confrontational way. I mean like just we have to think about it. Like this is not something we can conveniently ignore. It's something that we have to at least entertain, would be a better way of stating it. And at best, in doing so, we can, dismiss things such as the Zionist occupied government as an unfounded, baseless conspiracy theory with reasoning, right? And at worst, we can address all the issues that are collectively making for life to just be miserable for all humanity, bro. And again, it's hard. I'll finish with this last one, right? I don't want to believe. I don't want to believe this type of shit. You know what I mean? It's not like I come in here and it's not like I wake up in the morning and say, how can I repeat right-wing extremist rhetoric? I don't want to believe that. And I don't want to believe that they're true. You know what I mean? But I have to entertain it. At least think about it critically. And when I see videos like the one I'm about to play of Trump right now, it makes it very hard. It makes it very hard to... and again, I don't want to just put the onus on, AIPAC. It's just big money in general, bro. Just big money in general. The merger of capitalism and politics is invariably a disaster because once you get pay for play type shit, that's when corruption enters into the mix, right? So I'll finish with this video here of Trump really quickly.
We're going to run the country until such time as we can do a safe, proper, and judicious transition. Our current strategy of nation building and regime change is a proven absolute failure.
We will break the cycle of regime change.
We must abandon the failed policy of nation building and regime change that Hillary Clinton pushed in Iraq, in Libya, in Egypt, and in Syria. Regime change takes chaos. You've seen how that works over the last 20 years. That hasn't been too good.
Not a reckless interventionist globalism.
We're getting out of the nation building business. We're going to stay until such time as the proper transition can take place.
So basically, it's just a video that was put together on Instagram. I'll share the video on YouTube, but it's just a compilation of then and now of Trump before being elected president to Trump, and even in his first term, where he was violently anti-war in general, let alone regime change as what the plan is for, assumingly for Venezuela, to where he is now. And it's like, well, what changed? What happened? And I got a whole ass other podcast in the works talking about, a potential cause for what happened. And that is the big money donors that are associated with MAGA and Donald Trump. For those of you who are interested or perhaps already know, I am speaking, of course, of things like the Adelsons and all the other donors that recently took part in his last election cycle, right? But also with like his his son-in-law, Jared Kushner, his ties all the way up to Netanyahu, etc., right? But that would be a different episode. That'll be a different concept, different topic for another episode. For now, this is about as good a time as any to wrap this bitch up. So yeah, Onkatimo Mati. Peace.